Hi, everyone, and welcome to Rise Beyond OCD Answers, Insight, and Inspiration to Move Forward. My name is Shannon Shy. I'm glad you are here. Whether you're living with OCD, supporting someone you love, or working in the mental health field, this is a caring space where we can learn, connect, and find hope together. Just a quick reminder, what we share today is meant for education and support, not a substitute for professional care. And if you ever find yourself in crisis, please reach out. You can call or text 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline or 911 if there is immediate danger. For international support, visit findahelpline.com. You are not alone. Healing and recovery are possible and achievable, and we're here to move forward together. Before I introduce our guest today, a couple of other housekeeping items. Today's interview is being live streamed. The interview, like all of the other interviews in this Rise Beyond OCD series, is being recorded for later viewing on my YouTube channel, along with the 300 plus videos I have done on the nuances of OCD recovery. You can also get more information about what I do, along with my daily affirmations from me at my website at ocdrecoveryturningpoints.com. For this call, everyone will be muted and your videos can be turned on, turned off, whatever you want, except mine and our guests, of course. The chat room is open. I ask everyone to be respectful of others and maintain decorum, and we've never had a problem with that, so I don't expect we will have that today. We will have a Q&A with our guests before my final question. If you have a question, please put it in the chat. I will read the questions and try to get to as many as we can in the time allotted. All right. So now it is my great pleasure to introduce a friend I've had for a few years now, Dr. Kate Rogers. Dr. Rogers is a licensed clinical psychologist and serves as the Director of Research and Outcomes at OCD Anxiety Centers. She received her doctoral training in clinical psychology at American University, where she received extensive training in the provision of evidence-based treatments for a wide variety of presenting concerns. During her doctoral training, Dr. Rogers developed specialties in the treatment of anxiety disorders, obsessive compulsive and related disorders, and body-focused repetitive behaviors, BFRBs. Dr. Rogers has worked with OCD Anxiety Centers since 2016 and has held direct clinical training and quality assurance and compliance roles. As Director of Research and Outcomes, she collects and analyzes data to improve clinical outcomes and ensures clients receive the most up-to-date evidence-based interventions. Dr. Rogers also collaborates with universities and researchers across the country to publish peer-reviewed research and to help close the gap between science and practice. And on a personal note, Dr. Rogers, or can I call you Kate?
Call me Kate.
Okay, great. I just on a personal note, I've known you for a few years and you have always been so kind, so giving. It's a joy to watch you interact. I've seen you at the International OCD Foundation annual conference a few times, and it's just so fun to watch you interact with not only people who suffer from OCD, but with their family members and your colleagues in that space, which is what I find really unique about this conference is that you get that trifecta all together. And so I think you're awesome. I really appreciate the fact that you would take the time to come on this program and share insight and information in order to try to move our ball forward. So welcome to you.
Thank you, Shannon. You are so, so kind. If you don't know Shannon in real life, he is one of the best people. We do not deserve him.
No, stop
And
it.
the OCD community is very lucky to have him. So I'm so excited to be here.
Okay, well, I have about 20, 21 questions for you. We'll get through as many as we can. Like I spoke with you before we got on the air here. You're free to take this down any path that you want to. So if there's something that I haven't asked but you want to share, please just bring it up. This is a conversational conversation, and I want you to feel comfortable. So let's kick it off. Many people with OCD feel trapped by thoughts that seem to demand certainty before they can move forward. What would you want someone to understand about why chasing certainty actually strengthens OCD?
You know, this is something that comes up so often, right? I often find myself saying OCD demands certainty, this special, magical kind of certainty that doesn't actually exist. But OCD likes to scream, it's just around the next corner. If you just keep pushing, if you just keep trying, you must find it. And that is a very loud scream in a lot of clients with OCD. And what I tend to teach people is I'm all about the blunt reality. I think the blunt reality will often set us free. And the blunt reality is it's not only people with OCD that don't get to have the certainty. Nobody gets the certainty. It's just that OCD is demanding it, where people without OCD just live without it. But I think oftentimes people with OCD feel this injustice because it feels like other people get to know for sure, but I don't get to know for sure if you have OCD. And that feels so unfair, almost cruel. The reality is nobody has it ever. It's never been on the table for anyone. And that can be so discouraging because the way people talk in, normal life, they say things like, I know, right? Especially in the religious communities. I think this comes up so often with things like scrupulosity, that fear of breaking religious rules. And within these religious communities, you'll often hear people say, I know, right? When they're referring to their faith. Again, they mean something different. They don't know. There is no faith without uncertainty by definition.
Right.
But I just want to validate how unfair it feels for people with OCD when OCD demands certainty. And it feels like other people can have it, but you can't. Nobody gets it. Everybody else is just living their life without it.
And we have to learn how to move forward despite that uncertainty and feeling that anxiety and that unfairness and all of the other emotions that come with it, right? You have to learn how to do that. All right, second question. You've dedicated your career to studying what actually helps people recover. From both your research and your clinical work, what gives you the greatest confidence that recovery is truly achievable?
I'm going to try really hard to get through this whole thing without crying, but no, I'm not going to make it. This question always gets me. I knew it was going to get me. I like to tell people I have been doing this work since 2008, probably is when I started doing this work as a student. And I'm very much a one-trick pony in a lot of ways. Like, this is the work I've done for all of those years. I have never felt burnt out, which is wild in the mental health space, right? But I don't feel burnt out because the work is so reinforcing. Time and time and time again, you get to watch people get their lives back. And the thing that gets me every single time, the thing that always brings the tears on, because I am a crier, the thing that gets me is when a client comes in, their first day, we do exposure and response prevention at OCD anxiety centers. It's the bread and butter of what we do. It's the gold standard treatment, ERP. On a client's first day with us, they will often come in, we do this beautiful collaborative treatment planning and we ask what their goals are. And every single time, they set goals. And then at the end of treatment, they always say the same thing. They say, wow, looking back at the goals I set, I didn't even know what was possible. I was so in it, so trapped, I couldn't even see what life could be. They couldn't even envision it. And then at the end of treatment, they've gone so far beyond those goals to really, truly live this life that they hadn't even dreamed was possible. And y'all, it gets me every time. Every time. We get to see alumni speak about the life they have and the fire they walked through to get there. It's so reinforcing. So I feel so confident that this treatment can work because I see it happen all the time.
I probably talk about it stronger than, or as strong, or maybe stronger than anyone. I call it an irrefutable truth that if you do these things that make OCD weaker, it will get weaker. I speak as almost as a universal, irrefutable truth. And sometimes I get challenged on that and I say, okay, well, prove me I'm wrong then. All right. So you mentioned ERP. People often ask, am I doing ERP correctly? What are some of the most common mistakes you see? And how can someone recognize they're actually making meaningful progress even when their anxiety remains high?
Ooh, that's such a good question. Okay. I get a little overexcited with this one, to be honest. I am a big, giant nerd. self-identified big giant nerd. I collect historic DSMs. I have a framed photocopy of a napkin that Wolpe doodled on once. It was really like the father of exposure therapy with systematic desensitization. I'm a big giant nerd. I love this stuff. So the most common mistakes, number one, is still relying on Wolpe's stuff. I love Wolpe, framed picture of a napkin. And we've come a very long way since the time of systematic desensitization, right? Just trying to desensitize from something that scares you. ERP has so much more finesse. ERP has really advanced over time. I think most often people fall into systematic desensitization. They're just brute force exposing to something because it makes them uncomfortable. But you can be so much more strategic with it, and there's so much cool science that's come along since then that helps guide us through it. You know, the most recent layer on top of ERP has been inhibitory learning. And I have been a really big fan of this because it gives such clear things you can do, ways you can be strategic in ERP in setting up the exposures, in implementing the exposures that really maximize the learning you get from them. I would say when you start ERP, it's a really unfair fight. And anything you can do to increase what you get from each exposure is so worthwhile. So the number one thing I see as a mistake is falling into overly literal, overly concrete, brute force, systematic desensitization. And it's really easy to fall into that trap. There's a couple of things that I often say you can do to catch yourself from falling in that trap. Number one, pay attention to what you're testing, right? Good ERP with that nice layer of inhibitory learning tests a theory, a hypothesis. Your brain is wired in a way that it expects something bad to happen from this exposure. Even if you logically know, that's silly, it doesn't make sense. The screamy part of your brain is louder and it expects something bad to happen. So if you plan out an exposure in a way that is actually going to risk that threat your brain says is there, is actually going to test the theory. Put your scientist hat on. We're going to be scientists and do some experiments. Sometimes I like to say we're going to roll the dice Vegas style and see what happens. When you go into an exposure with that framework, you're much more likely to get the most out of an exposure rather than just trying to numb yourself to something or white knuckle your way through it with brute force. I'm always very impressed with the clients that I see because they are so not fragile. They are absolute warriors, and they are often very high achieving, people willing to push and do the work. And it's really easy for them to feel like if I'm just pushing myself really, really hard and making myself really, really uncomfortable, I'll get better. But that's not the whole formula. You got to be a scientist. Put your scientist on. Roll the dice, do it Vegas style, make it fun, and see what happens. That makes it so much more effective, but it's the thing I see missing most often.
That's a great point.
I would say the other thing that comes up as a really common mistake is probably only doing half of it, right? I'm either only doing response prevention, meaning I'm not engaging in the compulsions. I'm resisting, I'm delaying, whatever it is, and missing the actual intentional exposure part, or I'm doing the intentional exposure part, but I am neutralizing all day long. I am engaging in all the compulsions still. And so again, you just see people working really hard and getting really tired and feeling like this doesn't work for me, but they're missing something.
I love that. I too subscribe to that sort of like two-part theory that, yeah, you have to learn how to resist giving in to compulsions, for lack of a better way of saying it. But there's a whole other piece of cognitively looking at what it is you're doing and what you expect out of it, what you're trying to get. I love the scientist analogy there. That works. Okay, so this kind of relates back to your first question, dealing with uncertainty and certainty. But OCD can be, will be incredibly convincing. How can someone learn to distinguish between their authentic values and the demands that OCD disguises as responsibility, morality, or even safety?
I'm going to steal my answer from someone else because I had really exceptional training from other people. So I'm going to steal their answer. You and I actually met, Shannon, through Charlie Mansueto at the Behavior Therapy Center of Greater Washington, where I was originally trained. And to this day, I use something I saw Charlie use 1,000 times. There was a lot of religious scrupulosity. There was a religious hub there. I live in a religious hub now in Salt Lake City, Utah. When you're in a religious hub, you see a lot of scrupulosity. And when these clients would come in, I think this is so parallel to how this grabs onto values and identity. But Charlie would have someone come in and he'd take a piece of paper and he'd draw a line down the middle. And on one side, he'd be like, great, tell me the rules. Tell me the rules. Tell me what's important. Tell me the values. And he'd write it down on that side of the paper. And you'd be like, great. And these are usually lovely things like be honest. Don't murder people. These are good things, right? Hard to argue. They seem like they would, set you up for a nice life. And then on the other side of the paper, he would say, great, now I want you to tell me how OCD demands, because OCD loves to demand, it's very pushy, how OCD demands that you follow those rules perfectly. And this setup was everything because if you walk in to someone with, say, scrupulosity, and you're like, all right, we're going to do ERP and we're going to practice breaking your rules. They're already gone. It's a puff of smoke. That's all that's left of them. They've left the room. You're never going to get buy-in that way. And the whole idea really behind ERP is to get someone to build a life worth living and fully engage in that life. It's not just about the OCD. It's not just about the anxiety. It's about life. So instead, you take this piece of paper, here are the rules, here's how OCD demands I follow them perfectly. And you say, okay, we aren't going to do exposures to break the rules. We're going to do exposures to follow the rules imperfectly, just like everybody else. And just that one tweak, I think, changes the game very much. Not only is it way more approachable for people, but it also connects to how do we build that life worth living? Right? And oftentimes I would say people get stuck because values are important, right? I'm also ACT trained. I love a splash of ACT in ERP. I think it's so, so valuable because values matter. And if you've got values consistent, values driven ERP, people are much more likely to engage.
Yep.
And the exposures mean something. You don't want to just do these artificial nonsense exposures. You want to do ones that matter. When we say values consistent, we don't mean make sure that doesn't conflict with their values. I ain't going to play that game. I will always lose. Instead, we want to say, make sure this is an exposure that matters. Make sure this is an exposure that builds a crystal clear bridge to the life this person wants to live. That's how we should be picking them. And I think if we create that path, it makes that other conversation less needed but how do I tiptoe around my values? We're not going to do that. We're going to use the values to show us the way. We're going to do it imperfectly, just like everybody else.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit. You've worked with people struggling with body-focused repetitive behaviors, BFRBs, as well as OCD. What similarities do these conditions share, and how do the paths toward recovery overlap?
That's such a good question. Okay, what do they share? Number one, silence. Both of these groups, BFRBs, OCD, these are so often the silent sufferers. These are so often high achieving, highly functional, delightful people. And you wouldn't guess how much they are truly suffering. Sometimes they think their suffering is normal. My husband likes to tease me because I have some medical chronic illness stuff. And so sometimes there's pain that's nonsense, right? And my husband likes to tease me and remind me that if he asks me, well, how much pain is there? And I'll say, the normal amount is fine. And he goes, no, the normal amount of pain is 0. And that always reminds me, clients with BFRBs, clients with OCD, they often feel the same way. They think this is normal life. What everybody feels a 6 out of 10 on the anxiety scale on the average day. Doesn't everybody feel that way? No, they don't. That is often really surprising to people.
Mhm.
The normal amount of pain is 0. And so one of the things I think these two populations have in common is they suffer in absolute silence. And it takes them years to be properly diagnosed and have access to treatment. I think they share a lot of similar challenges that we're working really hard to break down. Treatment, though, is really very different, right? Treatment for OCD versus BFRBs, super different. For OCD, we're going to do exposure and response prevention. For BFRBs, I personally, I'm trained in habit reversal, but my favorite is CALM, the comprehensive behavioral model, because there is so much heterogeneity in that population. People experience BFRBs so different, and what drives them to do the behavior varies so widely that one person's treatment for a BFRB might look dramatically different than another person's. Whereas in OCD, it's going to look pretty much the same. We're going to do ERP.
Right. I learned so much when I do these interviews. That's that's why I love doing them, and I love opening up you all very smart, iconic people to the world. But I learned so much just doing them.
I love that.
Many people become discouraged because they still experience intrusive thoughts after months of treatment. And this is, I guess, kind of related to a previous question about progress, but how do you help people redefine what success in recovery actually looks like?
This is my favorite question. And I'm going to make it weird for a second. So you gotta stay with me. This is one of the trickiest moments in treatment, right? The realization that OCD is chronic. And people hear that and you can just see them start to tank.
Yeah.
Right? It's this hopeless, doomed feeling. You can see it all over their face because you told them it's chronic and you recognize that it's chronic. And personally, I have for many, many years have worked in an intensive outpatient level of care. And that's, intense. That's what the I stands for of IOP. And when I tell people that this is chronic, I like to remind them it's very easy for that to become a nasty stuck point. And radically accepting that this is a chronic condition that you will need to manage every day for the rest of your life is a critical component, a critical ingredient in good treatment. And you know what else is chronic? A chronic condition you have to manage every day for the rest of your life. Your teeth. Your teeth are a chronic condition. You have to actively manage them every day for the rest of your life. When I say it like that, it sounds very daunting, but y'all take care of your teeth every day. Every day, you probably woke up this morning and brushed your teeth, and it is a miracle that you did not stab yourself in the eye with a toothbrush because you were barely awake. It is often the first thing we do when we wake up, barely conscious. We do it every single day. And you know what? If you stop actively managing your teeth, your chronic condition, it's going to get real gross real fast. It's important to remember, if you've ever taught a toddler to brush their teeth, you've probably sat on a child at some point, helping them learn to brush their teeth. Teaching a toddler to brush their teeth is an event. It is an event for the whole household. It is an IOP level event, much like what it feels like when you're in the thick of treatment doing ERP. This feels like an event, and if it's great treatment, it's an event for the whole family, the whole household. But nowadays, you brush your teeth without even noticing. At one point, you were that toddler, and learning to brush your teeth was an event for the whole family. That's what OCD being chronic can look like. That's what ERP being infused into everyday life can look like. This should be as automatic as brushing your teeth. And yes, you have to do it every day for the rest of your life, just like you brush your teeth.
Yeah. And it doesn't, even if you have to manage it for the rest of your life, it doesn't mean you have to live in the same misery that you felt before you entered treatment, right? Ultimately, we weaken this disorder. And a related question, some people become so focused on getting rid of anxiety that they unintentionally make anxiety the center of their lives. How can someone begin shifting their attention back toward living instead of monitoring constantly how they feel?
I would say the quickest route to that is strategic meaningful exposures, right? Smush it all together. Find opportunities to face your fears on purpose, to do those exposures that matter to you. Be willing to zoom out and imagine, envision, wish for the life you really would love to have. Think big and then do exposures that lead to that life. I think that is the fastest way that we can stop worrying and start living nice and efficiently. And that is so much easier said than done. I know I said it so pretty, didn't I? And that's so much harder to do because the things that are focused on anxiety are screamy. That's the screamy part of your brain. You just have to be willing to take a leap of faith.
Yeah, and the word strategic there is perfect for this. I mean, I thinking strategically puts you at such an advantage with the overall view of everything that's going on, but thinking strategically. All right, in your experience, what personal qualities, not personality traits, but let's say learnable skills, tend to help people make the greatest gains during recovery?
Number one is probably desperation. Honestly, like if I'm really honest with myself, like I would love to say something prettier, but I do genuinely think desperation, right? I am desperate. I cannot keep doing it like this.
Right.
That tends to push people into the willingness place where they're truly willing to take a leap of faith. Because when life is okay-ish, it's much harder to take that leap of faith because this is at least the demon you know versus the demon you haven't met yet. I think the more desperate people are, the more willing they are to dive fully in. They are ready to give up on what they've been doing. It just doesn't work for them. It causes too much pain. That's probably the number one quality. It's not really a skill, but I would say that's the number one quality that leads people to really, truly doing the treatment and getting better. But I would say other things that tend to lend themselves nicely to ERP and to the OCD community is that this is a learning-based treatment, and these are people that tend to be exceptionally smart, exceptionally brave, exceptionally creative, and often really shine in those areas in other parts of their life. And if you can really tap into that, and I would even add stubborn. Some of my very favorite clients have been exceptionally stubborn. If you can tap into each of those things and use them to catapult the client through exposures, I think it does make a really big difference. Clients that are too stubborn to give up on this exposure, they do quite well. They can be the spicier clients that make your life more interesting, but they do quite well.
Yeah, I talk in terms of, getting yourself to do really difficult, scary work. And you can look across other professions where people like their daily life is doing dangerous work where they put their own life in actual danger. Like you could talk police, fire,
Mhm.
military, but they still do that willingly because there's a cause greater than themselves, right? And motivation is like a two-sided coin. When you can think of all the positive reasons why you're doing something really difficult, really scary. I want to improve my life, blah, blah, blah. But going back to your desperation point, I only had to turn back and look at what my life was like suffering severely from OCD and say, I don't want that. And if you're telling me that there's a chance that I can do something about this, I can remind myself every day of what I don't want, that I need to do this work to go. So I love that part of what you do is helping people find those reasons inside them that get them to do difficult, scary work.
Oh, could I add something to that? This is my rabbit hole moment.
Sure, please.
It's like, oh, I see it. You had also asked about like skills, right? Like essentially
Right.
what set someone up for success here. And I would say one of the most common mistakes I see is this idea of emotion regulation. Such a hot topic, right? Everybody loves this idea of emotion regulation because it sounds so dreamy. Finally, someone's going to teach me to control my emotions, to regulate them. And when I teach our own clients about this, I like to walk in and I say, welcome to the week of disappointment, because that's not what this is. But I think it's a really common mistake that prevents people from fully diving into ERP is that they are waiting for some special feeling of readiness, that they are confident that they will be able to regulate their emotions in those exposures. And they feel like that means controlling their emotion. That is not real. And it can create such a nasty barrier because you know what emotion regulation really means? It does not mean learning to control your emotions. It means no longer letting your emotions control you. That's what emotion regulation actually means. It means when my fear screams that I need to do something, I say, thank you for that hot tip. I get to choose what I do though. That is so powerful for people. And I think oftentimes, especially the way the mental health field talks about emotion regulation and window of tolerance and flooding and blah, 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 prevents clients from diving in, taking that leap of faith and learning that anxiety is safe. They are in control of their behavior. The emotion doesn't get to pick it for them. They get to choose. They hold that power. And sometimes it's the only power we hold when there's so many things out there we cannot control. But that power always belongs to each of us.
Amen.
That's my rabbit hole.
Amen. That's a great rabbit hole to be in. The next topic, it happens a lot, maybe to everybody, and it's in this genre of setbacks, relapses. When someone feels they've had a setback after they felt that they've made tremendous progress, what perspective helps them avoid interpreting that setback as failure?
I like to say, barring a time machine or massive head injury, we don't unlearn things. We simply learn new things on top of old things. In fact, that's like the essence of the whole inhibitory learning idea, right? Learning new things on top of old things. There are always going to be setbacks and lapses. And the dangerous idea is when you hear people say, feels like I'm back to square one. Barring a time machine or massive head injury, you actually can't go back. You can't ever go back to square one. You keep all of the beautiful learning that you've collected along the way. And that's so important to remember. We don't unlearn things. We learn new things on top of old things. So when we have a lapse, when we have a slip up, great, try again. Good job, go again. I mentioned to you earlier, Shannon, I'm a volunteer youth soccer coach for my son's soccer team.
Bless you for that.
Yeah, thank you. It's like my favorite thing, actually. But you'll hear me say all the time, like, we're rec soccer. Like, we're not going pro. We're a bunch of 8-year-old boys having fun and being silly. And sometimes there are cartwheels on the field. And every time the boys do something silly, like all of a sudden we think it's volleyball today, we're just gonna knock the ball down with our hands. You know what I say every time? I say, good job, go again. Let's try it again, guys. And I really encourage that mentality. We're talking about long-term treatment, maintenance. Good job, go again. Just like you were coaching a team of adorable 8-year-olds. That's the mentality to give yourself to.
Yeah, then this too will be a related question, I think. I didn't think of it as a related question, but I think it is based on your answer. As someone who carefully analyzes treatment outcomes, have you noticed habits or attitudes that consistently predict long-term success, regardless of the OCD subtype that we're talking about? But are there like consistent, predictable habits or attitudes?
We're mid-study on a couple of these, to be honest. There are a couple of specific variables we're really looking closely at, but I can't tell you the answer yet. I can tell you my theory.
Okay.
The reality is, it's really hard to find something that significantly predicts treatment outcome. I can't tell you how much of my job is sifting through things, trying to figure out what significantly predicts treatment outcomes. There have been some studies out there that I thought were really fascinating and also horrifying that found one thing that does significantly predict treatment outcome is therapist beliefs about exposures, which is horrifying, right? Since when do my personal beliefs about something predict my client's treatment outcomes? But here we are. And because of that, that's an area we have to focus on too, not just like, how can the clients work harder, try harder, do better? How do the clinicians, how do the clinical teams think differently in a way that will predict positive treatment outcomes? I think that's a huge area that I know our organization works really, really hard to improve. And I would love to see more work done on that. Props, shout out to the people that did that research over the past maybe 5 or 6 years. I love that research. I think it's really important. Things that we're actively looking at that we just don't have results on yet. our engagement in exposure practice, both during session and between session, and really trying to hone in on the best dosage, right? I said at the beginning, this is not a fair fight. And because it's such an unfair fight, the dosage of ERP practice matters. But what we don't know is what that sweet spot is. I think that would be especially helpful to be able to tell people, right? And with confidence, with research to back it up. I can anecdotally tell you, I can take an educated guess. We have our clients do at least 2 hours of ERP practice every single day. That's how we're going to win this fight. But I don't really have the solid research to stand behind that. And that's one of the things that our organization is looking at right now is what is the sweet spot? How much do you need to be practicing? How many times do you need to practice? How much time do you need to spend doing these exposures to predict positive treatment outcome? We're really trying to pull that apart, but I'll be honest with you, we just don't know yet.
So talk to me a little bit. This will set up the next question that I want to talk a little bit about courage and success. But tell us a little bit about OCD anxiety centers, what you guys do, where you are, that whole thing.
So OCD Anxiety Centers, we're a national organization. We have 26 brick and mortar clinics across the country. And we also offer like a virtual telehealth option. What sets us apart though is that we're one trick ponies. We are specialists in ERP. We're exposure specialists and we specialize in doing it at higher levels of care. So most of the options out there, right, are weekly outpatient psychotherapy. That's how I was originally trained as well. But what we found is because of this dosage question and the exposure is hard and people need support and community and someone to coach them through. We do this at intensive outpatient, which means at a minimum, our clients are with us for 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. That's why I said it's like an event. That's a lot. That's a big commitment and high dose ERP. So we do that and we do partial hospitalization, which is essentially double. 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. And this is all we do. 26 clinics, ERP all day, every day. You can be really confident that we're going to be good at it. And it's all we do. The other thing I think is really important and why I've stayed here for so long. I've worked at OCD Anxiety Centers for 10 years, most of my career. And the reason I stay is because it is such a mission-driven company. The mission being, bring this treatment that works to everyone that needs it. And as a field, that is where we tend to fail. Right? The white paper put out by International OCD Foundation at the end of last year found that a whopping 2% of people with OCD were receiving ERP. We are collectively failing. So I have stayed at OCD Anxiety Centers this whole time because it's so mission driven. And one of the ways that they do that is by taking insurance. 99% of our clients are using their insurance benefits. And we're very fortunate here to have a whole team, a whole department that gets us credentialed and paneled and sets all of that up for the clients as well. So we're not asking clients who are highly anxious and already suffering to also try to navigate their insurance company, which is nightmarish at best. We do it all for them. All they have to do is show up and put in the work.
And I'll say it now. When I edit this, I'll put your website in on the picture so people.
Oh, that would be great, Shannon. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. And I would say for the audience that I know a few others who work at OCD anxiety centers. You all are just lovely people, very giving, very focused, very mission oriented. So it's one of the reasons why you're here. In addition to the fact that I love you and I think you're awesome. All right, here's the related question following that. And it has to do with courage and resilience and success and in the recovery journey. Yeah, that's the best way to put it. Success in the recovery journey. And as an editorial note, it drives me nuts to see only the part when you look on social media and you see so many people who only talk about the suffering side and the lifelong misery and come join me in my pain, when there is this whole other side that I want people to see. And that is, yes, it's important to know that there are, you're not alone. There are people who suffer just like you do. But it's not just about talking about suffering, it's talking about recovery. Recovery is achievable. So, my question to you, that was a long introduction for this question.
It's an important one, though.
Recovery often requires tremendous courage. What have your clients taught you about resilience that continues to inspire you?
Man, stop asking me questions that are going to make me all teary eyed, Shannon. I think this is huge. I think, we can use big fancy words all day, right? And they make us sound smart and we do our hair flip, whatever. At the end of the day, what we're really talking about, the real cure for OCD, as close as we're going to get to a cure, because you ain't going to cure it, it's your teeth, is the idea that I've taught my son since he was very, very little. Probably by the time he was 2, he could answer this question for me. And I look at him and I say, buddy, what do we do when we're scared? And he'll say, every single time, we face our fears. That is the essence of what we're trying to get people to do and what we need them to continue to do. What we need them to infuse into their day-to-day life, into their family, into their lifestyle. The simple idea, what do we do when we're scared? We face our fears. Face our fears on purpose. When we think about the idea of resilience, my goodness, being able to live a life where when you're scared, you face your fears every time. Incredible resilience, and is translatable to so many other things, because it's not just about OCD. Life is hard. We live in a world that is hard. We live in a world where bad things do happen. And to live through that and still face your fears on purpose. I think that people that go through ERP are best equipped to function in the world as it is. I still remember March of 2020. Everybody remember March of 2020? Incredibly memorable time. I remember having to go into our group room and announce to our group members there that we were going to shut our doors. We were going to go full virtual. We weren't exactly sure what that was going to look like yet. We had about 48 hours to figure it out, by the way. We weren't going to stop treatment, but we were going to shut the doors to keep everybody safe. I saw this conversation happen in lots of different settings, right? In March of 2020, the schools, staff, and I saw a lot of people panicking. And I'm pretty sure I was one of them, to be perfectly honest. And then I stood in that group room and I braced myself. I braced myself for this room of highly anxious people to freak out at me. And they didn't. They handled it dramatically better than I had seen anyone else handle this. They were like, yeah, okay. They had built up this incredible resilience where no matter what wacky thing life was going to throw at them, they were like, yeah, I got this. Cool. Is there
That's
a
a
link
great
for us to
story.
use? It's like, and that memory is just so crystal clear in my head still, because it surprised me so much. It humbled me so much and reminded me that they are absolute warriors in there.
Yeah, Matthew Bannister from England, who I adore, he's in the live stream, but he just made a note. I'm going to read it for everybody. Hearing others' recovery stories is so incredibly empowering to take that leap of faith. When we face our fears, too, knowing others can do it gives us hope and belief that we can do it too. It can be that fuel to our inner fire. So, one final question that I want to direct towards the folks who have OCD, who suffer through this. And then I want to move to family members and a couple of questions that we can direct toward the therapist community. So the final question directed at the OCD sufferer community. If every person listening or watching this today remembered only one message from this conversation during their hardest moments with OCD, what would you hope that message would be?
The one thing I want people to hold on to, what do you do when you're scared? You face your fears, and you can. You absolutely can. That screamy part of your brain will tell you you can't. That screamy part of your brain will tell you you have to find the certainty. You have to know for sure. It's screamy. What I want you to keep in your mind is, what do you do when you're scared? You face your fears, and you can.
Now, let's switch gears for family members. Families desperately want to help, yet reassurance often becomes part of OCD's cycle with the family members. How can loved ones provide genuine support without unintentionally feeding the disorder?
I often like to teach people the difference between validation and reassurance, right? Because families do desperately want to help. Everyone is doing their absolute best to help. And many family members are inadvertently making things worse in their desperate attempt to help. And they often do that in the same ways that we all do as humans, right? This idea of reassurance and invalidation. What these really mean. Reassurance is explaining to someone why they don't need to be afraid of something, right? We do that all the time. Invalidation, more broadly, is explaining to someone why they don't need to feel the way they feel. Like, think about the last time you received invalidation, the last time someone explained to you why you don't need to feel the way you feel. I promise you, it was not helpful. And it was probably really annoying, but it came from a place of love. It came from a place of desperately wanting to help. Validation, in contrast, instead sends the message, I see you, I hear you, I care, without trying to explain to someone why they don't need to feel what they're feeling. That's not going to help anyway. But sometimes when we teach families to stop reassuring, they get like weirdly silent and awkward, or they actually turn into jerks thinking that's helping, right? If somebody says, well, am I going to hurt somebody? And instead of giving the reassurance, no, of course you're not going to hurt anybody. You've never hurt anybody. Why would you think you're going to hurt anybody? The family trying to not reassure goes, maybe you will. Y'all, that is socially weird when you do that. Please stop doing that. And you can't do the reassurance. That's also unhelpful. What fills the void is this skill of validation. I see you. I hear you. I care. Recognizing someone's experience without trying to fix it for them is shockingly powerful. And here's where you get mixed up next, though. You try to smush them together. You say, I hear you, but here's why you don't need to feel that way. For me, as a therapist, one of the things I had to learn was to zoom in on the word but and do everything I could to remove it from my vocabulary. It's actually pretty unnecessary. And instead, let the validation have the power that it can have. After I use validation, I force myself to shut up for 10 excruciating seconds before I say anything else. And during those 10 excruciating seconds of silence, I'm not someone that sits with silence super well. After those 10 seconds, you will see the power that validation holds. Sometimes all someone really needs is that sense of support and community. They don't need you to fix it for them. And so if you are a family member trying to figure out how to navigate this and you wonder, am I just reassuring them? I want you to ask yourself this question. When you say blank, whatever it is, what are you trying to accomplish? Go ahead and ask yourself that. What am I trying to accomplish when I say this? And if you're trying to accomplish explaining to someone why they don't need to feel the way they feel, shh, stop. Validate instead. I see you, I hear you, I care, and then shut up for 10 seconds. And you will see what appears to be witchcraft. The whole dynamic will shift. If you are waiting for that Hogwarts letter that has not come, this is the closest you're going to get.
That's a great answer. And actually, that answers all of the questions that I had. I only had 3, but
that was efficient.
You answered the other 2 questions in that thing. So let's direct one question. I'm going to be mindful of your time. Direct one question for new therapists before we go to the audience. Let me pick one here. All right. This one is a great one. You work at the intersection of research and clinical practice. What advice would you give to new therapists who want to ensure their treatment remains faithful to the evidence while still being flexible enough to meet each client's unique needs?
Ooh, I would say, can I give 2 answers to that?
Of course.
Okay. And I just love saying this out loud. And so thank you for the platform to say this out loud. Therapists, blind compliance is dangerous. And what I mean by that is if you are just doing what someone taught you to do, doing what you're being told to do without understanding the why behind it, I really encourage you to challenge it, to ask why questions, to question what you're doing, and ideally to read some of the research yourself. Stop taking it secondhand from others. Dive in and read the real papers. Google Scholar is a magical place. I lost library access many years ago, and I survive on Google Scholar, and there's tons of full text journal articles there. I really encourage practicing clinicians to read the research for themselves and to never fall into the trap of, I did this because someone told me to. Blind compliance is dangerous. It's something I shout from the rooftops to our own staff all the time. I say, don't trust me. That is never going to be good enough. Ask why, challenge it, because we serve vulnerable populations, and that is just part of our responsibility as clinicians. The other thing I would say, wait, bring me back to the original question, Shannon, before I go too far off the deep end.
It was basically that balance between, as you say, the fear of drifting off of, let's say,
Yes.
blind compliance and the unique needs of the client.
Okay, this one's going to make you feel bad. It makes me feel bad. Blunt reality, science keeps sciencing, right? When we know more, we can do better. That is a tough pill to swallow as a therapist because you care deeply about every client you've ever served, right? And as you learn new things, as the field learns new things, you have this nasty moment of cognitive dissonance where you have to face the reality that if I adopt this new thing, I have to recognize that I was wrong, even though I was doing my very best and I was highly trained, and that's what the books were telling me at the time. And you have to acknowledge the reality that that's what you gave those other people you served. And that is a painful reality to sit with, but it's an important one. Every time we improve our treatment protocols, I feel this pang of guilt. That's a huge part of my job at this point, is I make sure we have specific diagnostic treatment protocol, like a manual for every disorder that we treat at OCD anxiety centers. And I update them regularly, right? Because science keeps on sciencing. And every time I update those protocols, I see in my mind every client that came before. And I feel this horrible pang of guilt because I feel that it is so unjust that those clients didn't get this, because I believe this is better. It's better science. It's better treatment. We're always working to improve it. And how dare I have given something less to the clients that came before and trusted me with this work? And I think really good clinicians will feel that for the rest of their career. And it's a feeling we have to be willing to lean into. If we are really great at what we do, science keeps sciencing. And I encourage you to be open to new things, new ideas, and question them looking at the actual science. Don't jump on that bandwagon just because it looks shiny. Look at the real papers and be willing to say, oopsie doodle, I was wrong. And I can't tell you how many times I've done that throughout my career. And it stings every time. But I hope I never stop doing it.
And that's why it's so important for you to be delivering this message, right? And everyone who comes behind us, we offer something to them about what we learned and really the tough parts of our experiences, mistakes that we've made, or whatever you want to say. Is I tell this to my children, like, these are the big mistakes I've made in my life. My life would be different right now if I would have done this when I was your age. So don't do it. So it's a really important lesson.
And for clients out there, if you've tried treatment and it didn't work out for you, please know that science keeps sciencing. The treatment keeps improving. Do not give up. Try again.
Yeah. And I'm going to give you another opportunity to talk about hope for the client. Before I do that, we have Matthew on the line now. Matthew, do you have any questions for Kate? And if you want to come on, I can introduce you, Kate, to Matthew. Matthew's a big deal in the OCD recovery community. He leads a support group over in England.
Appreciate you, Matthew.
He's awesome. Really is awesome. There he is.
Matthew.
Thank you so much for the kind words, Shannon. I really, really appreciate it. I just want to say it's mutual as well. Like, you're one of the best, in my opinion, for peer support, for OCD recovery. Again, your light just shines so much hope to so many people, including myself. I just love, again, the warrior attitude that you bring, because it really does change and save lives. And as well, Kate, this has been an incredible interview. I've really, really enjoyed it. And again, you're a true real life hero as well. And we are all so grateful for you in the OCD community of what you do. I do have a question. I love the part that you said about doing the Vegas exposure, Vegas style. I just think that's brilliant. Like in my personal experience, value-driven exposures is such a game changer because it gives you such a strong why, an incentive to like, I can do the hard thing because I've got that why behind it. Like you were saying in your interview, I've got the understanding of why I'm going into this exposure. It's like OCD has robbed me of this for so long. Well, this is my why for doing it. So I can feel that enjoyment again. I can feel like I can be alive in the moment, be present in the moment without fear taking over. Like I'm back on the driving wheel, and it's such an incredible feeling. Like I'm doing it. But yeah, just your thoughts with that Vegas style, I think is brilliant.
I love that. I think it is so important. And I love to hear from people with that lived experience that, reminds me of all of those clients that get to that finish line and they say, wow, I didn't even realize this was an option. And it's exactly what you're describing, Matthew, the ability to dive into an exposure because it matters, because you're at the driving wheel. I love that metaphor. You're driving that bus. That's that idea of you can have power even when you don't have control. We often don't have control, but we do have these pockets of power, and being able to choose to do an exposure to face your fears because it matters. That is everything.
All right. Thank you for that question. Yeah, thank you for the question, Matthew. And now I have to convert my dollars to pounds and pay you for your compliment. But beyond that. Okay, Kate, one final question for you. And again, I really appreciate you coming on. This has really been enlightening, educational for me, for sure. And I know it will be to everybody who sees this. It will be on YouTube, and people can go there, and OCD anxiety centers, or you personally, are free to, whenever I send you the edited version early next week, because I'm moving this weekend, but I'll send you the edited version shortly. You're free to do with it whatever you want. You can
We'll scream it from the rooftops, Shannon. I
pass it
think
around.
it's a great way to spread awareness. So I'm so excited to do this with you.
Yeah.
We'll scream it from the rooftops.
And you're part of an elite club. The other people I've had on this program, they're, like I said, consider you an icon, and I guess this is Shannon's dream team. I got to choose the people that I'm interviewing, right? So
I'm very honored.
If we were going into the Olympics, my team would get the gold. So
I love that. I'm very competitive.
Okay, so you answered a question that I asked for the sufferer community. I don't like the word consumer, so I call it suffering because that's what it was and is. But anyway, you answered a question where I said, what message would you hope that somebody going through their hardest moments with OCD would hear? I'm going to change that a little bit and put you in the shoes of meeting, let's say, a patient for the first time who's coming to you, really not understanding what the future looks like, both with treatment, but also their life, because all they know right now is suffering and pain. And they've been diagnosed with OCD, and they come in and you have an opportunity to sit down with them. What message of hope do you give them?
You've painted a picture of something that's happened countless times, Shannon. I can tell you exactly what I say because I usually say the same thing. The first thing I say is, I am so glad you're here. I'm so glad that you finally found us. You are in the right place and we can help. That moment in those sessions, I say it every single time and I mean it every single time. Sometimes getting through those doors for a myriad of reasons is really hard, requires that first burst of bravery, of courage, of resilience. Getting through those doors is hard. And so when someone makes it through the doors and sits down in my office for the first time, I always say that, and I mean it every time. I'm so glad you're here. And I admire that they've made it so far. That was the big step. From here, I'm going to guide you through. You've got this. We're going to do it together. It's going to be okay. It's going to be better than you can imagine. I'm so glad you made it through those doors.
That's so powerful. Very powerful. All right. Again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for what you do to help people who suffer and their family members. Your contributions to this industry, to science, to learning, all of it. You're just a wonderful soul. It's my honor to know you. And I know we'll see each other in the future again. I don't want to see any TikTok videos of a crazed soccer coach chasing down referees, so just keep that in mind. But beyond that, thank you so much for being here. It really has been a pleasure having you.
This was so much fun, Shannon. I love it. I'm always happy to do anything I can with the OCD community to help move it forward. We all have to come together to help people get through that door.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Matt. I appreciate everything you do. Okay. Have a great weekend. And again, thank you so much. Tell everybody at the OCD Anxiety Centers I said hello.
I will.
And
Good luck on your move, Shannon. And thank you so much for having me.
you're quite welcome. All right. We'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.
Bye.